amazing to get to talk to him and just hear all those great stories and different things from Tom Flores, who we had in the show to talk about John Madden just the week before, to the draft and everything else. Really, really exciting to get a chance to talk to him. And now we're joined by Sam Bradshaw, Sigma365.com, with us here. Sam breaks down everything when it comes to X's and O's and film. Sam, a defensive performance like that, I think people expected Baylor to play well on defense, but it was really outstanding in the fact that Dave Aranda wasn't scared of the Ole Miss offense, whether Matt Corral was in, and he especially wasn't scared of it when Luke Altmaier came in and Ron Roberts as well. I hate to keep leaving him out, but what were the keys to that, and why were they able to dominate on defense like they were?
Thanks for having me on. And some of the big keys they had is when you go back to the Art Briles offense, that a lot of what Ole Miss does is at least partially built on, is it's built on run the football until they outnumber you. And then you've got your deep shots and you got your RPOs built off of that when they give you more favorable looks to throw on. What Aranda and Roberts said is, we're going to coach our defensive linemen to occupy your blockers, keep guys free, and we're going to give you numbers to run on. We just don't think you can get our guys blocked, and they couldn't. And then from there, they were able to run pretty safe coverages while even challenging the receivers because they had extra bodies in coverage. And from there, there's not a whole lot that either quarterback was able to do. Both of them had some times where they forced it. Both of them, they couldn't protect them. And beyond that, Baylor was just very well schooled on what Ole Miss wanted to do. They took full advantage of how much time they had to prepare. When Ole Miss would try RPOs, guys got their hands up and batted it down. When they would try a lot of their motion and those wide receiver sweeps, guys saw it coming before they even put them in motion. They understood the formations, they understood the plays that came off of it, and Ole Miss had no answer. They had one scoring drive in which that backup quarterback made a couple good plays, and then after that, a guy misjudged the deep ball. Other than that, it was a shutout.
Sam, 3 turnovers, nearly had a fourth, depending on that JT Woods call, but it goes against him. But the 10 sacks, what all played into, I know you described some of it there, but what all played into getting 10 sacks on that Ole Miss offense?
Well, first and foremost, you've got an offensive line that's pretty good, but that defensive line absolutely outmatched them. They had no answer for Ika, and you're talking about the defensive coordinator and the head coach at Baylor are both experts at getting significant pressure without having to bring extra guys. So you've got great coverage, forcing him to hold the ball, but you've also got really good schemes to get the matchups you want. They were able to get their linebackers on tailbacks. They were able to get some of their speedy guys on less athletic linemen. And then guys that really couldn't handle Ika one-on-one, they were able to scheme up some one-on-ones for him.
Sam, offensively, wasn't the best performance, and Gary Bohannon struggled mightily. Do you think, for stretches of the game, do you think that was more hamstring related, or do you think that we kind of saw, the lower end of Gary's potential?
Well, first and foremost, Ole Miss did a good job of copying a lot of what had worked against Baylor throughout the year, whether you're going back to the original Oak State game or the TCU game or other games where the offense hit times where they sputtered. And they were well schooled on what Baylor wanted to do. We're talking about Aranda and Roberts having their guys ready. There were a lot of the things that they'd broken out. You have a corner jumping one of their favorite pass combinations outside of that bunch set. They got a guy right in the throwing lane on one of the RPOs, and if Baylor threw another RPO during the game, they really didn't show much of it. They did a good job being all over what Baylor wanted to do with a lot of their base offense, and it was a pretty vanilla game plan for Baylor. They had some bells and whistles, but it wasn't stuff you hadn't seen before. And Durkin and his guys were all over it. As far as what it means about Bohannon, obviously, when you throw for 40 yards in a major college football game, you better be running it all over them, or else you're probably going to lose. And they're going to have to, whether it's his hamstring or whether it's something where he was rusty, whether he wins the job, whether Chapin wins the job, whether any of these guys get out there, you're going to have to be able to show a lot more than that, or else a good defense is going to take it away, particularly when they have an offseason to prep.
Sam, there's already been some returns announced for Baylor next season. I'd like you to talk about both spots if you would, but for one, what does safety Christian Morgan coming back mean? We know JT Woods is off to the NFL, but Morgan announcing his return. And then offensive line-wise, which was one of the biggest stories by far this year, Jacob Gall announces he's coming back. Grant Miller announces he's coming back. Connor Galvin announces he's coming back. And we're waiting to hear on Khalil Keith, but, kind of feels like he may be returning as well. What does that in total mean for Baylor moving into next season in your eyes?
Well, on the offensive line, it's huge. If you can go from potentially having one, maybe two returning starters to only having one starter gone, that is a massive difference, both in terms of starter experience, but also depth, where you can rotate in a bunch of guys, where you can sustain injuries and still be able to keep on trucking. And that is a huge asset for an offense that is going to be missing a lot of its receivers and its top two tailbacks. So there's a lot of skill position turnover on offense. So being able to have your offensive line and tight end group intact and return both quarterbacks, that's a huge help when you've got massive turnover on the other part of the offense. And then defensively, Christian Morgan's very athletic safety. He's a piece that you could potentially even see him sliding down into Petrie's spot at the star situationally. But he's typically at that deep safety. So between him and Devin Neal, you've got at least a decent starting two, and you got Lorando Johnson, who got a lot of play as kind of a dime extra star player when they go against four receiver sets. It at least solidifies one of those spots, and there's certainly going to be some inexperience on the back end of that defense. So getting a guy with that many snaps under his belt, like Morgan, who also has a lot of athletic upside that can fit a number of spots on defense for you, it's invaluable.
Sam, they moved Abram Smith from linebacker to running back because they weren't thrilled with obviously they didn't have the guys they thought could do what they needed to do in this wide zone offense in the running back room. Do you think another year in will help the guys like Tay McWilliams and, of course, some of the younger guys like Jordan Jenkins and Richard Reese? Well, of course, Richard Reese will be, just on campus, but do you think they'll help them understand this scheme a little bit better so they can do what they want to do, or do you think that running back might be a position we need to watch in the transfer portal?
I think both, honestly. I think you can see guys get better depending on the guy, depending on the amount of work they have, and depending on their running style. The thing is, with a lot of zone schemes, vision is the key, and some guys have it, some guys don't, but some guys, it's just a matter of coaching points because they generally get it, but they just don't have a feel for it yet. Others, they're just not going to get it. So you probably have a little bit of both in that room right now. So I do think if they find somebody proven that fits the system, that they know can walk in and solidify that spot, they'll take them. But I also got to think they've got one or two guys in that room that if they had to play the next season tomorrow, they'd be comfortable doing just that.
You mentioned wide receiver. R.J. Sneed did announce that he's going to be leaving, taking his 6th year to another institution. And Sam, Drew Estrada graduates. Tyquan Thornton's moving off to the NFL. And quite frankly, we just didn't see a whole lot of the rest of the receivers. I mean, maybe a splash of Hal Presley at times, but a lot of unproven there. What are your thoughts on the Baylor wide receiver room?
It is a lot of unproven and a lot of speed. The amount of 100-meter burners that you have in that room is incredible. So depending on who gets on the field, I have no doubt about their ability to hit the big play, but how well do they run routes? How well do they catch? How well do they sell things? How do they come out of those breaks? That's something that remains to be seen. How well do they block? You haven't seen too much of those guys. You've seen them come in and sporadically make big plays, and Monterey Baldwin made an absolutely huge play in the Sugar Bowl. But at the same time, that's a handoff. That's not going downfield, setting somebody up and breaking your route at the right depth and then doing something with it after the catch. That's everybody on defense looking to stop the wide zone in the opposite direction and you running where they're not. So it's it's a to be determined. These guys were recruited for a reason, and they absolutely have speed to burn. So there's definitely big play potential there, but I would be very surprised if Baylor didn't at least make an effort to bring in somebody a little more seasoned in the transfer portal.
Sam, when it comes to this offense and what they ask of the receivers, it is not necessarily a simple task. They need their guys to block downfield, and it's not and there's no route tree like the Browse offense. I'm not trying to dig on the Browse offense. It's just that offense didn't have a route tree. This one kind of does, and there are some differences in what they want from those receivers, isn't there?
Yeah, and with this offense, you want the ability to take the top off the defense, but you also got to be able to do a lot of the ball control routes. You also got to be able to block, and you've got to wear a lot more hats. Whereas in the old Bryle scheme, a lot of the receivers, you were going deep, or you were breaking slant routes or post routes over the middle, or you were doing some stop routes. It really wasn't the full route tree, whereas here it's very much a pro West Coast style passing game attached to this wide zone scheme, and you really have to have guys that can handle a number of different things, and that's why you saw a couple of the guys that may not be the fastest in that room get a lot of playing time over the last season, because they could catch the ball, do something with it after the catch, even if they aren't going to pull away from everybody. They're very good with their hands, very good with their routes, very good at setting up the defender. And yeah, time will tell what they have, but it's been a great year. The offense turned around, and if you gave me the choice of the 2021 to 2022 transition or the transition they had last year, where if I have to choose between I don't know what I have on the offensive line and at quarterback, and compare that to I don't know what I have at receiver, but I know what I have at the line of quarterback, I'll take the line and quarterback every day.
Going back to that Monterey Baldwin play, how brilliant was the timing on that? And, that's a type of play that we've seen them try to, get to pop with Estrada, just to no avail throughout the year. But, clearly Ole Miss not expecting little Monterey Baldwin to get in on the action. I thought that was kind of brilliant timing for an offense that was struggling.
Right. It's one of those plays that just kind of lulls you to sleep, because they run that counter wide receiver motion both to the play side and away side so many times. And they almost popped it earlier. If the tight end gets a little better block earlier in the game, Estrada might have been off to the races. I didn't get a good look at the behind the formation camera, but at the very least, he's getting 10 plus yards when he ran it earlier. But tight end couldn't quite get his block. And so it went for like 1 yard, or I think. And, it's a great play call, but it's also one of the basic constraints that they build into this offense. That and the quarterback option to the backside are two of the main ways they kind of hold people accountable on the backside without having to have the running back cut back. And, it's a great compliment to the scheme. And the scheme was, even though the passing game was misfiring, even though there were some holding calls that ended a couple drives, Ole Miss only had one tackle for loss. And they did some good things in terms of looping stunts and blitzing linebackers and giving a fair amount of single coverage, more than I expected going in. And for them to only have one tackle for loss after gambling all of that, you weren't consistently getting beat at the line of scrimmage. When Ole Miss played you straight, you were running on them. So if you had a little better performance in the passing game, this could have been a blowout.
Yeah. No, I think we all kind of thought the same thing watching that, is that there was definitely the opportunity for a blowout, given the way that game was going. Curious, Sam, your thoughts. Dave Aranda being a defensive head coach and his pedigree, when the defense performs well, there's going to be a lot shown on him and a lot of credit given to him. But what did you make of the job Ron Roberts did? I mean, I know this was a good unit last year, but, just capping it off, the run that they had, clearly without this defense's efforts, they're not Big 12 champions, Sugar Bowl champions. But, what did you make of the job Ron Roberts and his staff did throughout the year?
Incredible. They had, don't get me wrong, they definitely had a couple of games where it could have been better than it was, where things weren't entirely sharp against Iowa State and TCU. But for the vast majority of the season, guys have been prepared, beyond prepared. and the technique, you can tell at all levels of the defense, improved as the year went on. You know, you see some teams regress, other teams improve. This team, it looked like night and day comparing what they had early in the year to what they finished the year with. And they were physical. They were willing to play single coverage in order to win that way. They were willing to put everything on their D-line in order to win that way, depending on the week. And, you know, it's a versatile scheme, and Ron Roberts is an incredibly accomplished coach over his career. Baylor is very fortunate to have him because no matter what you think of Dave Aranda and how good he is as a defensive game planner, he's still the head coach. He still has to wear other hats. And having such a coaching mind like Ron Roberts in the room is such an asset to this team.
Sam, I know we got to run here, so if you kind of say this in 30 seconds or less, but your overall thoughts, just 12-2, Big 12 champs, Sugar Bowl champs. I mean, I don't know what your expectations were. I don't remember, honestly, coming into the year. I thought they'd be a bowl team and, you know, flirt with a good season, but definitely didn't see this. You're kind of moratorium on the 2021 Bears.
Yes, I think with the 2021 season, you knew you were going to have an early start that was going to be pretty good. It was a question of what you were going to get offensively. You knew the defense would probably take another step forward because you would get a lot of those defensive linemen you didn't have the prior year back. But offensively, the night and day performance from a year ago was incredible. And based off that, they were able to win some tough games in a Big 12 that was pretty deep, if bowl season's any indication. And, yeah, they pulled together an incredible season, and they're building a program here that should be putting a lot of those together.
Sam Bradshaw, SicEm365.com. Sam, thanks a lot. Great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you guys. You guys have a good one.
All right. Sam Bradshaw, S11 does breakdowns on the site all the time. So if you're not a premium member, check it out. He does great stuff. I mean, it really gets in depth. I mean, you heard there, that's just a little microcosm of it. And we have him every week during the football season. When we come back, Grayson Gruden